Hey guys, welcome back. It's episode number 91 of Spectator Sports. We're here to recap Super Bowl 58, an epic game between the San Francisco 49ers and the Kansas City Chiefs. But before we get into it, let's do some housekeeping. If you're new to the channel, like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. It helps us grow. Take a look at our Instagram and TikTok pages. You can also get clips from this episode on those platforms and here on YouTube in our playlist. And the full audio from this podcast you can get on Spotify. All links are in the description. The Kansas City Chiefs are the first team in 20 years to go back-to-back, and this game went out pretty much what I thought about in my preview video last week. 49ers jumped out early, 10-0 lead, but as the game waned on, the Chiefs hung around. They were always within 7 to 3 points throughout the rest of the ball game, eventually taking that lead and forcing overtime. And how they got there was typical what you see, the experience of the Chiefs. They have been there, they have done that. While the 49ers have been there before, this is a team with many new faces, and it's different than it was 4 years ago. And we saw the inexperience of Purdy and the offense kind of show up when the lights and the moments mattered the most. What we've seen in the past is that the Chiefs start off slow, they can be a little bit sloppy, and this whole game was kind of like a microcosm of their season. Drops, red zone issues, turnovers at inopportune times. We even saw that from Patrick Mahomes. But when the game continued to wane out, Mahomes saw a lot of familiar looks against this San Francisco defense and found ways to get around that to pave their path to victory. I thought a big pivotal moment in this game was that muff punt by San Francisco. You have the lead 10-6, you gotta stop, you're getting the ball back, maybe you're having a chance to extend this lead, but you give the ball deep in your own territory inside the red zone, and immediately Mahomes makes you pay with a pass to MVS, who has struggled for much of the year, but since the postseason came around, he made big catch after big catch. We talked about that in this entire postseason run. Caps it off with the touchdown catch, and it's been kind of a redemption arc for MVS. I've learned not to bet against Patrick Mahomes, and yet again he's proven that he can get it done on the biggest stage, and we'll talk about more of that later in this podcast about what this means with this third Super Bowl championship. This Chiefs team feels very similar to the New England Patriots of years past, where Tom Brady and Bill Belichick were the main pieces, but then you also had this all-world tight end, some mediocre receivers, and then this really good defense. Now, a couple years ago when they traded away Tyreek Hill, we questioned that move. Why are you doing this? And now you thought they were vulnerable. But with that move, you got picks back, you got more cap room, you could fill out the rest of the roster. And with one of those picks, they used that on Trent McDuffie. Trent McDuffie is now an all-pro cornerback, and he's very versatile. You can put him on the outside, you can put him in the slot. And what Coach Baggs has done, particularly I've seen in this last year, is that he uses Trent McDuffie in slot corner blitzes. And in a big pivotal moment, McDuffie came up huge in a slot corner blitz. He didn't get a sack, but he disrupted the play and got the stop, giving the Chiefs a chance to get the tie and send this game into overtime, which we'll dissect later. But this team was the worst version of the Kansas City Chiefs. Not a lot of receiving talent, plagued by drops, the most penalized offensive line in the league, and yet they still get it done against a very stacked team on the opposing end. And the last 2 years going back to back, they beat a very good Eagles team with an all-world defensive line, talent across the board. And yet again, they rallied from a 10-point deficit against these 49ers. And who's going to stop them next year from a three-peat? Because you know that they're going to get a number 2 receiver to help out across of Rashee Rice. They will make some moves to improve the roster. This roster that we saw this year isn't going to be that bad. They will certainly improve, and the sky's the limit for this Chiefs dynasty. With Patrick Mahomes winning his third Super Bowl title, third Super Bowl MVP, and this is all by the age of 28, and he surpassed Tom Brady in several of these feats. Tom Brady had a very slow start to his career, as beginning as a game manager into becoming the best quarterback of all time. Now, he's done that by winning a lot. He's accumulated a lot of stats due to his durability. But now the question is, with 7 rings, it sounds like an unattainable feat to measure up against with Patrick Mahomes. But he's already done so much in such little time. We know that he'll get at least another 2-3 championships that will take him to at least 5 or 6. If he does finish with fewer championships than Tom Brady, we should start viewing Tom Brady as a Bill Russell figure like in the NBA. Bill Russell, in his day, he won 11 championships, which is absolutely a phenomenal feat, the most ever in NBA history. But at that point, it was against lesser competition, lesser teams in the NBA. Now, with Mahomes, he's proven that he has the better arm. He can do a lot more than Tom Brady, and he's done it so often in such a little amount of time. Now, if he's able to do this, he would be much like what Michael Jordan has done, and he's highly regarded as the best NBA player with fewer rings, 6 to Bill Russell's 11, but we know that Michael Jordan is probably the best player of all time in basketball. So Mahomes could have a very similar arc. It's something to debate on. I think he needs a couple rings to get into that competition. I still think he needs a couple rings to get into that conversation, but it's definitely something that we will have in the near future. With Andy Reid now winning his 3rd Super Bowl title, this begs the question, where does he stand amongst the all-time best head coaches? With 3, I think that Bill Walsh is still a better head coach. He revolutionized the game with the West Coast style of passing, and that's something that Andy Reid was part of back in the day. And took a lot of those concepts eventually from Mike Holmgren's team in Green Bay, later to Philly, and now in Kansas City with the Chiefs. He has won in Philly, and he's won a lot more with the Kansas City Chiefs, something that Bill Belichick, we can't really say that without Tom Brady, he hasn't really done a ton. And that's where I think when we have that debate with a couple more championships for Andy Reid, it could be very well that Andy Reid could go down as the best head coach of all time. Let's dissect that pivotal moment. This is now the 2nd Super Bowl ever to go into overtime. Kyle Shanahan was part of that first one back in Super Bowl 51. And in that one, the Patriots received the ball, they scored, their game is over. Now, they've updated the rules since and guarantees both teams a possession. And winning the toss is one thing, which is great, but I would have absolutely taken the ball second, because then you know what you need. When you get the ball second, depending on how things go, if you force a punt, all you need is a field goal. If you force a field goal, all you need is a touchdown. You can even tie with a field goal. If you allow a touchdown, you can equalize with a touchdown and then even go ahead and win it with a 2-point conversion. You know, you kind of control your fate there when you're taking that second possession. And that's where I think that's a misstep by Kyle Shanahan. And giving Mahomes an extra down to get 10 yards or so is just something that changes the whole way play calling is done, how gutsy or the chances you take with that possession. And I felt that was a major misstep that is definitely going to haunt Kyle Shanahan for years to come. Kyle Shanahan's come up short again, and it seems that he's had this choker label now attached to him after countless blown lead. Let's go back to Super Bowl 51. He's OC of the Atlanta Falcons. He gets away from the running game, doesn't bleed out the clock. Atlanta blows a 28-3 lead. A few years later, as head coach of the San Francisco 49ers, he has a lead on the Chiefs, 10 points heading into the 4th quarter, blows that, they lose. A couple years later, he's in the NFC Championship game against the LA Rams. He has a 10-point lead, cannot hold on. Rams go on to win the Super Bowl. Last year, against the Philadelphia Eagles, he tries to get a little gimmicky and uses a backup tight end to block Hassan Reddick, and Hassan Reddick blows up Brock Purdy's elbow. The game's virtually over from there because they have no quarterbacks available. Then, this year, he has a 10-0 lead in the Super Bowl, cannot find ways to handle that, and later loses. The cherry on top, I think, is that you don't have the chance to educate your players on the new overtime rules. This happened 2 years ago. Andy Reid had this whole presentation, according to Kansas City players when they were interviewed about it, that they had education on every facet of the new overtime rules, while this wasn't really something apparent because they received the ball and didn't defer in overtime. This is just big mismanagement in the game that matters the most, the Super Bowl, and you don't have your players prepared. And from schematically, I mean, when the offense kind of lulled in the 2nd quarter to the 3rd quarter where they got away from the run from Christian McCaffrey, I know he wasn't running it great, but you gotta keep riding him because he's going to eventually bust open a big game. That happened in the receiving game, but not really in the running game. It just didn't seem like they stuck out with it. Didn't find ways to get Kittle the ball, nor Ayuk, nor Deebo Samuel. Christian McCaffrey almost had as many receiving yards as those three I just mentioned combined. Just didn't get it done. No answers for the blitz. Every time Spagnuolo called a blitz, Brock Purdy didn't have any answers to it. And I can't blame Brock Purdy for it, because Mahomes, he was able to screen a pass away from the blitz when they dialed it up against the Chiefs. This all comes back to Kyle Shanahan. He is now absolutely a choke artist in this league. And now we have to question, because this is his show. He's been running it now since 2017. We have to question, is he overrated as a head coach in this league? The NBA trade deadline was last Thursday, and a bunch of pivotal moves, not as big as last year, like with KD going to the Suns, but it seems that the Knicks are going all in, with reports that Mitchell Robinson could be coming back after what was thought to be a season-ending ankle injury. They're going to have a lot of depth going into this postseason run. Right now, they're a little banged up. OG has an elbow operation. He's going to be missing a little bit of time. Julius Randle, separated shoulder. He'll be back at some point. But right now, Jalen Brunson is holding down the fort. And with this trade for Bogdanovich from the lowly Pistons, this team is absolutely stacked. With Tom Thibodeau operating things and what the Knicks are doing, they have a big opportunity. I'm not saying they can beat the Celtics in a 7-game series. They would absolutely test them. But they have ways now. With every move that they've done so far, they're absolutely gunning for it. And I'm very excited to see what happens with the Knicks and what this new roster could entail in the postseason. I know that Doc Rivers is just gotten started as the Bucks head coach, but it has not gone well in the first 7 games. They're just 2-5. The defense still cannot find ways to get stops. They have big issues on the wing, hence their trade for Patrick Beverley at the trade deadline. That should help, but it can only do so much. Damian Lillard is great offensively, but he provides nothing on the defensive end. There's nobody on the wing that can consistently stop opposing members, and they have had losses to the Trailblazers, the Utah Jazz, teams that are not that great, and they've allowed more than 120 points on countless occasions. One of their 2 wins came against the Charlotte Hornets, the team that is at the bottom of the association. Doc Rivers will have to find answers fast. Otherwise, this Bucks team is not going to be able to right the ship come postseason time. So that's it for this episode of Spectator Sports. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you haven't done so already, take a look at our clips here on YouTube or on TikTok or Instagram. You can get the audio from this podcast on Spotify. Thank you so much for Joy for editing this podcast, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.